So Mrs. Yonke coming at you with some more social studies. We have count them, three vocabulary words for today, and they are rural, I'll tell you what they mean later, urban, and suburban. It looks like like if you take out the back part, suburban, but instead of suburban, you call it suburban. You kind of put it together, suburban. All right, so let's learn about what those three words mean. You're going to need your social studies book for this part. We are on page 278. So you might want to pause this, get your social studies book, 278. Okay, so on page 278, we are focusing on that last sentence. Notice I wrote the number at the top, but that's going to disappear in a minute in case you're not there yet, 278. That sentence at the bottom, underneath that yellow box, says, what kind of community do you live in? Is it rural, urban, or suburban, or a suburban community? So that's what we're going to try to answer by the end of today's lesson. So let's learn what those three things mean. Go ahead to the next page, 279. You don't even have to turn your page. It's already right there. And it says a rural community is found in the countryside where there's plenty of open space. An urban community is one that is in a large city, and a suburban community is a community near a large city. But we're going to dive into those even more. So we're going to start with rural communities. Notice this is a heading. A heading tells us what's going to happen in each section. So this whole section is only about rural. They're not going to tell us much about urban or suburban at all, but I bet that will come in one of the other sections. Here we go. Belle Plaine, Iowa is a rural community about 40 miles southwest of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Today, about 3,000 people live in Belle Plaine. Notice Belle Plaine is capitalized because it is the specific name of the city. They like to get together and have fun during the year. On the 4th of July, capitalized because it's the specific name of the holiday, there are fireworks, music, and a parade. One special kind of parade is a tractorcade. Wow. More than 500 tractors parade through Belle Plaine and other rural communities in Iowa. So let's look at this picture right here because I bet that's the tractorcade. It says a tractorcade moves through a community. So it's just tractors on a parade. They put together the words tractor and parade to make a tractorcade. Oh. Rural communities have their own mayors and other government officials to make and enforce laws or rules for their community. Local governments also provide services such as schools for their towns. Some towns have their own schools while others share schools. Many rural communities have the technology to connect to the internet quickly or use cell phones, but there are still some that may not. People in these communities may use slower dial-up phone lines to connect to the internet. Rural communities have local newspapers that share information. Some people in rural communities are farmers. Farmers grow crops like corn that people in larger towns and cities depend on. People in rural communities depend on other communities too. They travel to suburban or urban communities to buy what they need. People may travel by bus or drive their cars. So let's look at that just real quick. I'm going to turn to the next one so that you can see that the next one changes to suburban. So we're not going to talk about rural anymore. So really, when I think of rural, I think of like I'm picturing like someone who lives out like on a farm type area. It doesn't have to be a farm though. I'm just thinking of somewhere where there's a lot of space. The houses might not be super close together. Like there might be a house and then there's a bunch of land and grass around it, and then other houses farther away. So you might not have like direct neighbors. And a lot of times in places like that, they might use well water instead of like just the water. It still comes out of a sink, but it comes from a well in the ground instead of city water. So it has like a specific smell and taste to it. And in-person kids, anytime you guys want to pause, like if you guys are like, oh yeah, I have connections to that. I know about a well, then you could always pause and discuss. But that's what I think of when I think of rural. And sometimes they might not have the best internet connections because maybe there's just not a really good internet service for them. So let's turn the page to 280 and read about suburban communities. Our heading tells us that we're switching topics. And let me see if I can get that in the best focus possible. That is worse. And that's as good as they're going to get. Alamo Heights, Texas is a suburban community. It is surrounded by the city of San Antonio. Today, almost 8,000 people live in Alamo Heights. In Alamo Heights and other suburban communities, there are many houses with yards lining the streets. You might also expect to see a library, a post office, schools, stores, a movie theater, and parks there. Take a short drive and you will find a large shopping mall. Suburban communities have their own governments to make their local laws. People in suburban communities are often proud of where they reside. When there is litter on the streets of Alamo Heights, for example, people help clean it up. They cut the grass and clean streets just like people in other suburban communities do. And here's a picture of a suburban community. Sometimes people abbreviate it to the suburbs. You might have heard that before. But if you notice, all of the houses are fairly close together, which you won't see as much in a rural community. So it's like a tight-knit neighborhood. They all obviously, so like if it's Fort Wayne has some rural communities, suburban and urban. We have all of those in Fort Wayne. So you might find a suburban part of Fort Wayne that they're close to like the big part of the city, like the downtown area, but they're not like they have to drive like maybe 15 minutes or so to get there. And that's also true with Indianapolis. If you live downtown Indianapolis, you might have to live in an apartment, or the houses might be like super, super close together, and you're in the big part of the city that it's hustle and bustle and busy, busy, busy. That's not the suburbs. That's not suburban. Suburban communities look a little more like this. Like mine looks similar to this, but I mean, my house isn't that fancy. It doesn't have to be that fancy of a house. It's more about like your location to downtown. And I live up 15 minutes away. So I live in the suburbs. And look, did we change to a new one, or are we still on suburban? There's no new heading, so we didn't switch. It'll tell us when we're going to switch. There are plenty of activities for children in suburban communities. They can swim at the community pool or play basketball in a local park. They can also join a soccer or baseball team. People in suburban communities obtain news about their town from local newspapers, on the internet, or on television. Obtain tells us right here it means to get. They get their news. They acquire it. Many people who live in suburban communities work in a nearby city. Some people who live in Alamo Heights work in San Antonio, while some drive their cars or trucks on busy highways. Others choose to take an express bus to work. People began moving to suburban communities to get away from the crowded cities. As new highways were built to help people get to the city quickly, suburban living became more popular. All right, so this is a little bit about suburban. Remember, it's just not necessarily in the big hustle and bustle, but it might have highways and streets so they can easily get to the city if they need to, and it's usually not quite so crowded. Let's see for the next page changes topics. Let's see. Yes. Now we're going to talk about urban communities because the heading tells us that. So, by the way, I'm going to go back. I am so sorry. Bad Mrs. Yonke. I did not read the caption. Whenever there's a photograph or a picture or an illustration, you want to read the caption. It says people in suburbs use highways to get to and from the city. So this might be them going to the city. This might be us going into urban area. Now you can turn the page. And here I'm going to look at this picture. It doesn't have a caption because captions are sentences. It has a label, Atlanta. This is a picture of Atlanta, downtown city. Urban communities. Many people live, work, and play, because remember, that's just communities. Communities are where you live, work, and play. In urban communities like Atlanta, Georgia, about 4.5 million people live in Atlanta. Most live in apartments or high-rise condominiums. A condominium is a condo, kind of like similar to an apartment that you rent. It's more like a house, though. A condo is housing owned by the people who live there and may be part of a larger building. In Atlanta and other cities, people work in tall buildings or skyscrapers. Many people from suburban communities travel to cities to work. Once inside the city, people can use public transportation to get around. The city of Atlanta has a rapid transit rail system, streetcars, and buses. Cities such as New York have underground subways. San Francisco has cable cars. There are many things to do for fun in a city. People can shop in stores or visit museums. In urban areas, people have access to technology. Internet and cell phones help make communication easier. So internet and cell phones, all that technology, that's available in any community, but sometimes rural communities might have problems getting better connections, and certain urban ones will as well, because maybe it's just, maybe there's just not good service, maybe there's not a good tower there or something. I'm not really sure why. All right, so if you are still a little foggy about what is the difference between rural, urban, and suburban, what you're going to do is, well, actually, even if you're not foggy, do it anyway because I asked you to. You're going to watch a video that's not me, it's somebody else made it, and it's giving you more pictures, more examples, and explaining urban, suburban, and the rural communities. Then when you are done watching that, your assignment is to get on Flipgrid, click the link to Flipgrid, and I want you to tell me what type of community you think you live in, but then you got to prove it, because otherwise I might say, oh, you lying, you don't live there. So you want to tell me I live in a suburban community because there, and I know this because, and then you'll tell me how you know. So what clues do you have? Okay. All right. Go ahead and watch the other video and then do your Flipgrid. See on the flip side. Do you see what I did there? That was cute.